This session is focused on the challenges that come from ensuring that your AI is fit for purpose. I'd like to feel that the origin of this, I'm Justin Trenner, by the way, I'm one of the directors of QA Media. I had a wonderful conversation with Joseph Itkin about how you validate AI about a year ago and how you validate it in journalistic aggregation. So maybe there's some connection with the subject that our speaker, Yelena Trefstreva, is going to address. She is a business development manager and researcher for ExactPro. And Yelena is going to talk to us about software testing in journalism and how AI is transforming both areas. So over to you, Yelena.
Thank you so much, Justin. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see it all right?
That's very clear.
Okay, perfect. Okay, just before speaking about my topic, let me tell just a couple of words about the company I represent. ExactPro provides software testing services for mission-critical technology that underpins global financial markets. We work with exchanges, clearinghouses, security depositories, digital exchanges, brokers, and other financial institutions worldwide in over 20 locations on all 6 continents. So we work at the confluence of the financial industry and technology, but today I'd like to peek into another knowledge domain, as sometimes another sphere helps us to get a better understanding of what we do and how we do it. So I'll try to draw some ideas from comparing software testing to journalism. So first question is probably why do people need the news? Well, maybe the first question is really has to be, do we need them at all, given being over flustered with the COVID news right now and over polarized by those on the upcoming elections? But anyway, if we sifted through all the information we receive through multiple channels, we use the news as a context for our lives, our choices, our decisions. So staying informed is the main reason why we need the news, however frustrating they may be. But most importantly, news is needed for the society to shape it, to make it resilient, to help it evolve. And now, what about testing? Why do we need it? Funny enough, the reason is the same. It is the reason to stay informed. And it is actually very interesting that high quality journalism and software testing have certain similarities. Both areas rely on analyzing massive arrays of data. They both are aimed at finding inconsistencies and deviations from the expected routine, or maybe from the normal picture of the world. And they both result in creating reports describing the abnormalities, sometimes looking into their root causes as well. And both news reporting and test reporting have a significant influence on their respective domains, which are society and software. So what makes good journalism and good software testing? In our view, there are 3 main components that contribute to the success of both areas. These are people, tools, and governance. People are the key component, and in both news reporting and test reporting, it is important to have a right mindset. So you have to have strong exploratory abilities, strong analytical skills, and what is very important, to be brave enough to share your findings with the world. At ExactPro, software testers are trained to report defects in a way which is actually very close to the best journalistic standards. Some of the indicators that a person is a professional in what they're doing are as follows. You have to be be sure that the reported information is accurate. You have to take responsibility for the sourcing and the presentation of facts, so to provide references or in terms of media or test evidence if we talk about the testing. Also, you have clarify and correct the information you provide. You have to handle responsibly the difference between facts and opinions, avoid deceptive headlines or titles in defect reporting, for example, and in general, all the information that you provide has to be transparent, like ownership, political affiliation, if we are talking about the media, and versioning and environment in case of testing. So let's shift our focus towards the next key component. The second one is tools. With our world becoming more complex, there are more and more dimensions to analyze, both in software and society. And more dimensions means more data. To harness the big data, both areas need intelligent automation tools. When it comes to journalism, an extensive survey conducted by the London School of Economics in collaboration with the Google News initiative shows that journalists are not actually scared by the automation, which they see as augmentation of their current roles rather than replacement. And in fact, they even seem to embrace the AI transformation. Over 2/3 of the survey respondents said that the key motive to use AI in their sphere was to make journalists' work more efficient. And another interesting insight provided by this research is that it outlines the areas of AI being applied to journalism. So a couple of them are presented on the slide right now. But speaking more generally, there is a strong dependency between news and technology. So let's take a look at the tools for managing the data in the media industry, like media platforms, news portals, social networks, intelligent digests, etc. Surprisingly, when it comes to data, the revenue is mostly concentrated in the distribution channels rather than in the original sources, where the information piece was generated in the first place. And this is true with social media. A good example here is YouTube, where a cash flow is generated by views and user engagement through the platform, rather than from the actual intellectual property provided by content creators. And the tendency is not confined to the journalism domain. Here's an example from the capital markets industry. We know that it takes a big effort to establish a stock exchange, and it is a technologically complex thing which requires huge investments. And after it is launched, of course, a considerable revenue can be generated from its direct functionality. So trade submission, execution, but recent years have seen even more significant growth in the area of the informational services, reusing the capital markets data. So market data dissemination, benchmarking, providing indices, they all have become a very profitable addition to the revenue generated by the original data. So it's no surprise that now any organization in any business area is looking towards the data processing direction. So as the big data is looming over professionals in most industries, there is a need to extract the most of it. So what can we do about it in software testing? first, we need to collect the data, and across organization, there should be a strategy to capture all the data related to testing activities. So every test run should be recorded, all the data, configurations, test execution results, logs, and system traffic are to be collated. The second step here is to store the data. When the data is collected, multiple file formats will complicate its subsequent processing and querying. Hence, a key consideration here is to unify the data by transforming it to a consistent and normalized format. And the third step here is maximum reusage of the data, because it's just it will just bring maximum value if it used multiple times. In our software testing practice, we address the massive data reusage task with the following two approaches. The first one is passive testing, which is less obtrusive as it causes no impact on the system under test. Plus, in contrast to one-time action, which is typical for active testing, once the data is captured, passive testing allows us to analyze it as a whole or on the event-by-event basis. Thus, one of the ways to actively reuse the data is to develop passive testing tools. And the second approach that we have is active testing. Here, the data used to interact with the system under test, along with the data extracted from it, can be modified, transmuted, and recombined to generate even more data. However, to achieve this on a scale, we need to make sure that our tools have sufficient performance to be up to this task. So, keeping in mind the idea that the value is not in data per se, but rather in the ability to process and reuse it, ExactPro has created its new generation test automation framework, which is called TH2. The TH2 solution facilitates data collection from multiple sources. It provides a unified data storage and is built as a set of microservices. Its architecture allows for passive testing through massive querying across the test execution data, distilling the knowledge from the whole warehouse, and it also supports data combination and transmutation approaches to generate new test data and use it and reuse it for active testing. And finally, I'm going to the last component contributed to a high quality of both journalism and quality assurance, and this is governance. Our clients are highly regulated entities which have their regulatory responsibilities to provide resilient and transparent service. Drawing a parallel again with journalism, the government also has responsibilities, the ones to regulate what is happening in society and with society. So in this respect, independent journalism provides valuable insights for the decision makers. The governance, or to be more precise, the efficiency of governance can be defined through how the decision makers handle the results of independent journalists' work. That is the reports of about the abnormalities in society. And the same is apparently true about software testing of mission critical technology platforms in financial markets. The governance to a great extent is characterized by stakeholders' reaction to the test execution results. So, with regards to this reaction, there are a couple of aspects. One of them deals with false information. And again, sticking to our parallel, this relates to a problem of what to do with inconsistent data, which is obtained from independent journalists and independent testing teams. Fake news in journalism is when something that didn't happen is reported and widely reproduced. An indicator of fake news can be like bad publications never make corrections to the published materials. There are generally no references or evidence to support the facts, which of course undermines the quality of a process and hence the credibility of the source in general. Fake news is definitely not a good thing, and for high quality journalism to identify fake news and prevent its distribution is a challenging task. But this task itself also raises a question. If we tighten the censorship criteria in journalism, what would be worse? To let 10 fake news out into the wide audience, or to censor one piece of real news? So, be it journalism or software testing, the choice between the two is a question of policy. Fake news in software testing is rejected defects, when something that allegedly went wrong hasn't been confirmed. Again, false claims about the defects are no good because lots of rejected bugs create an additional load on the system, and plus they significantly undermine the credibility of testing praxis and quality assurance specialists' expertise. However, the fake test report censorship problem has another side. Defects leaked into production are also something to take into account. And the real problem here is how we balance this equation. The more mission critical is our system, the more it is important to lower the censorship standards, as one real bug in production is more critical than the difficulties that can be potentially introduced by 10 rejected defects. Software testing practice has many examples of firms who consider the rejected defects ratio to be very important metric for test effectiveness, and they try to achieve zero rejected bug reports. But is that right indeed? In addition to a possibility to miss a real defect, an excessive censorship approach can also undermine the potential of the system to improve through the whole investigation process. There is an idea that the key to a system's stability is not robustness or resilience, but rather anti-fragility, the ability of a system to improve under uncertainty and high variability. A system which has never operated under volatile conditions is very likely to collapse after one disruptive event, which wasn't observed previously. And vice versa, a disarranged system can exist and function normally, even among the disruptions. So the idea of eliminating the defects as the idea to eliminate bad news or fake news is actually similar to the idea of getting rid of all the bacteria in the world. We just need to work more on the reaction to the errors rather than censor the reports about them. So the second aspect of governance that is worth mentioning is the one of responsibility. Even when one is equipped with the information provided by people and tools, there is still a decision-making process. Again, the question of how the stakeholders perceive the information reported in news or test reports is the one of policy. The responsibility of decision-making cannot be outsourced, cannot be delegated, and the decisions themselves have to be based on something. And here are two polar approaches for the decision makers to interpret the data that they get. The first one is relying on an oversimplified model that it used instead of a complex, not so easy to grasp model of reality. A good example is a testing process governed by the requirement traceability principles when for each requirement, one test scenario is executed and the whole process is limited to a box checking exercise. In this case, the simplified reality is quite different from the real one. So there is a very high probability that taking the process rather than basing the decision on complex testing will result in evasion of responsibilities, in failure to perform one's regulatory obligations. On the opposite side, there is an approach when the decision is made based on a good, sophisticated model. While such a model is a very good approximation of the reality, nevertheless, it may tempt you into relying on its decisions. But in terms of responsibility, all you should expect from a complex model is a recommendation, an estimate, or in other words, just some cue to base your decision upon. Algo cannot be blamed for the decision. That be, again, a transfer of responsibility. So looking into the future, we believe that automation and AI will not eliminate independent journalism, as the society needs not only the facts, but opinions, commentary, expertise, and deep analytics based on the real-time context. And similarly, the automation and AI will enhance the role of the human factor in software testing. With more complex and sophisticated technology systems, we're going to need more sophisticated testing tools. The people who are involved in independent testing are required to have the right mindset underpinned by integrity, transparency, objectivity, and the same is true about the stakeholders. So no matter how deeply we are already able to automate the systems and processes, the responsibilities cannot be delegated to an algorithm. Decision-making lies with humans, and it should take into account the results of independent testing. Efficient governance is the ability to interact with information which is presented through various sources, the ability to grasp the complexity of the environment, and the ability to gradually build sensible mental models, which will allow to make the decisions and perform your regulatory obligations. So related to our question about the three components, which are really critical for good journalism and high quality software testing, ExactPro is definitely on track with the first two, with people and the tools. And we are happy to talk to you about turning them into something good. So thank you.
Thank you, Elena. You raise a lot of challenging issues on both sides of the coin there. By the way, you might want to stop sharing the screen so that our audience has the benefit of seeing us. If that's wonderful. Thank you. You raised some interesting questions about the use of AI to validate your software, the use of AI to build valid news sets. And I was thinking about the dimension of trust. Part of the dimension of trust comes from the mindset of the person who sets up the passive model, especially, because the passive model is going to simply process according to business rules. What's the analogy that you would see between an inherent bias in a testing model and an inherent bias in a news aggregation using AI?
To continue with this analogy, when we are talking about the trust in journalism, you may think that what it means to trust the piece of news or to trust a certain publication. One would think that we can really trust the news source when it reports truthful, transparent, true information, right? But if we look at the people, if we ask the people, it will actually turn out, and the report by the London School of Economics showed that, people perceive an information source as truthful, not only when the news, the information is good and of a high quality, they also trust it if it resonates with their own feelings, with their own values, with their own thoughts. And this is very important to understand when it comes to testing. So sometimes we tend to trust processes which we feel that resonate with the procedures that we are used to. So maybe it makes sense to listen to other opinions, to have a view from the independent software testing team, and just to make informed decisions, taking into account different points of view.
This crossover between passive and active testing and AI fascinates me because I think there is a dimension here which is very relevant in the financial services. There's a large amount of news consumption in algorithmic trading. So you have itemized news where you're using that to automatically gather signals for your algo trading model. And if there's a bias in the passive production of the news, that's going to impact. On the other hand, on the active side, you're going to take a database and back test, and that's a form of active testing, I would say. So perhaps, would you say that the challenges that you're describing are not as separate worlds as one might assume? They're actually very closely related worlds.
I'm sorry, say it again.
But because of the use of itemized news in automated trading programs, then the bias with which the automated news feed is prepared and delivered, what is selected and how the itemized news feed is prepared and delivered may influence the performance of the algorithm. So you need to consider both the passive testing use of that news and the active testing use of that news.
If we shift to software testing here and talk about using AI in both passive and active testing, they are used in maybe a little bit slightly different applications, right? So if we are talking about passive testing, AI can basically help in terms of log analysis and monitoring. So when it is difficult for a human being to grasp like slight changes in the system's behavior, AI can really help here by clustering the incoming traffic and identifying what changed, and the ability of AI to make it quickly and help and augmentate the human judgment here is a real help in software testing as well. And speaking of active testing, it is also a very helpful mechanism, and application of AI to software testing is maybe better to illustrate on the testing of market surveillance and algo trading, because in this case it is like an interchangeable approach to use to simulate the algo by the means of AI techniques in order to test market surveillance, and vice versa. You can test algo trading systems, like the algorithm of trading, by with the help of simulation mechanisms of market surveillance.
To come to the another very important point that you raised, you said that one of the challenges or one of the indicators that a system may have an unacceptable degree of bias within it is whether the producer of that feed of news is open and willing to publish corrections. if they're interested in discovering the truth, then they almost certainly will be, because nobody delivers correctly all the time. If they're interested in publishing something that is self-justifying, then they won't be. I would say that one could see that also in software testing, that there may be some groups where people are so wedded to their software development model that they're unwilling to change. Is that something you see?
Um, yes, the only analogy I can come up with is when you submit a test report, you have to be prepared to test and retest it once again after the system configuration have changed, if the environment has changed. So you have to look onto the problem from different angles and under different conditions, of course.
Yelena, you've given us a really interesting series of parallels. I'm very grateful. It's been a fascinating talk. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yelena.